Off the Wall Productions is proud to present Voices of the Methow. This is a series of conversations with interesting folk in and around the valley. On July 11th, 2019, Deborah Craig from the North West Cooperative Development Center gave a presentation on caregiver co-ops at Room 1 in Twisp, Washington. I recorded this as a public service, and Deborah has kindly given her permission to let me put it up on Voices of the Methow. So here we go.
Well, I am sure that everyone in this room is probably very aware of the Aging America. So when you think about it, it's quite shocking when you think about it that between 2010 and 2030, that the number of people over 65 will double. And we have at least 10,000 Americans retiring every single day. And for the first time in history, that people over 65 outnumber children under 5. This has never happened before. So this is and then also, oh my gosh, the percentage of elderly that are 90 and over has doubled since 1980. That is a really rapidly growing group there, folks over the age of 90. Especially in smaller rural communities, people are having to come together and figure out a lot of this for themselves, which I can already hear some of that here within this room, that people are already talking about this issue, which is great, and trying to make some steps to prepare. At the same time, we have a caregiver shortage, and everything that I see indicates that it's going to get, I hate to say this all the time, but it is going to probably get worse. So we really need to be growing these caregiver jobs, but we don't have young people going into this as a career. So we really need to change that. So you see that the demand for these positions expected to increase by 70% over the next 20 years. And this was, probably put that statistic together 5 years ago. So yeah, so we currently have about 3 million direct care workers in the United States. We need 5 million by 2030. So it is not at all hyperbole to say that this is a crisis. And then, like I said, especially in a smaller and rural areas, we really see this magnified with people being in isolation and not having the resources. We also know that this job, home care workers or any kind of direct care workers, that workforce is rapidly aging. So, I mean, look at this group. We don't see too many 20-year-old caregivers. Yet we desperately need younger people to go into this field. So how are we going to attract them? I mean, we already know we have to increase the wages. But another way could be from some of the benefits that you would get through being in a co-op. To be a part of a social movement that is creating good jobs with self-determination may be attractive to some of the younger folks. So what is a worker co-op? It is a private business that is owned and operated by the people that work in it. So it's not a nonprofit. It's not socialism. It's a private business. And a worker co-op is owned democratically by its members. No one owns a bigger piece than anyone else. One member, or one vote, one member. One member, one vote. It is also, it exists to meet the needs of its members. This is a really important point, especially with caregivers. When I work with caregivers and we're trying to get to the point where we're setting maybe our fee for services, it's very common that caregivers will try to lowball that as much as they can because they care about the people that they work with and they really want it to be affordable. And so there's always kind of that little tension there of like us trying to encourage them to get paid what you're worth. You have to make a living. And so this is a good reminder that the co-op, the benefit of the co-op, definitely the elder community gets benefit from that. But the reason it exists is to meet the needs of the members. So how is a co-op different from other, I'm just going to say compared to other agencies, the member owners will set the wages, benefits, and policies that would be established kind of right at the beginning. You would set those. And members have a say in how the business is run. They have a greater influence on the quality of care. I see this a lot in, I'm trying to think of what agency that was, doesn't matter, but I know they just eliminated any kind of nail care, and they also now don't do any kind of transportation. So I see a trend in the agencies that are trying to limit their services because of liability. So one of the things that with the care, like with when it first kind of we started hearing that the agencies are eliminating this nail care. The co-op I was working with said, should we do that? We better look at that. Because if this is a risk, we don't want to have a risk to our clients or to our business. And so what they decided was, no, let's get more training. So they brought in a nurse to give them that training. So it's a different motivation of being able to provide a full range of services and really quality care. And then the other difference in a co-op and an agency is that the profits that the co-op makes go back to the workers. So you can think of this as, like when you think of another agency, maybe they have to satisfy their shareholders, and or maybe they have franchise fees, profits go to that. In a co-op, the profits at the end of the year, we look at the profit, and the board determines how much will be paid back to workers. How much do the business need to hold on to? And then how much is distributed back to the workers based on how many hours they worked. Now I'm going to tell you a really fun story, exciting story. But also know that this might be an exception to the rule. So the Circle of Life Caregiver Co-op in Bellingham, Washington, I think it was probably about year 4. We had a really big profit. We made in profit, I think it was $135,000 in profit after we paid everything. And this is a really low overhead business, home care. You don't really need to retain a lot of the profits for home care. You have your regular expenses that you have every year. And unless you're planning to expand or do something big, it's easy to distribute the profits to the workers. You don't really need to hang on to a lot of reserves in this business, in this industry. So we were able to pay out $2.78 per hour for every hour that they had worked the previous year. And we had our annual meeting, and we got to pass out these profit checks and profit sharing checks, and it was so amazing. So imagine if you're a caregiver and you're making $12 an hour or $13 an hour at the time, and at the end of the year you got a check for $3,000 or $5,000. We had one person, she worked way too much that year. She had a $9,000 profit sharing check. Well, this, if you're making that, low wages and, $3,000, that's big news. That's life-changing. I can finally get my car fixed, or I can finally pay off that hospital bill. That's super meaningful in the lives of caregivers. So that was really great that we were able to do that. We paid profit sharing probably year 5, 6, 7, and I realized that the market is changing now. The wages are going up because of the union, basically. SEIU has raised those wages, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing for the industry. But still, we know that $15 an hour it's on the low end. It really doesn't, depending on where you're living, I guess, that doesn't really meet the cost of living. So how does a co-op benefit the community? So it creates living wage jobs and lowers the turnover rate. So that is probably, in terms of the consumer's perspective, that's probably the best point that we can make is that home care co-ops, they reduce the turnover rate. A new study just came out, was last month. The turnover rate nationwide for home care agencies is 82%.
Wow.
Imagine if every year 82% of your employees were gone and replaced. I mean, that is what is going on in the industry. Of the home care co-ops, the ones that I know their turnover rates, and I'm going to show you where they're all at in a minute, but 30% is the highest turnover rate I've ever seen. These people stay in their jobs, they're very dedicated to their jobs, they are supported in their jobs. So that's probably like, for our kind of market advantage, that's kind of the number one thing we can hold out to the consumer, to our to elders. We already said that. Democratic workplace, it influences democratic participation in another great story. I had a caregiver who was, actually, I think she was from the Virgin Islands. Anyway, she was an immigrant here, and she came to my office one day and she said, guess what? I'm going to vote in the election. It was a presidential election. I'm going to vote in that election. And I was like, great. And she said, yeah, because I voted in the co-op election, so I know how to vote now. I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So the very first home care co-op in the United States is in New York, in the Bronx, and it's called Cooperative Home Care Associates. It's been in business since 1985. It's an amazing organization. They have a huge training center where they have big rooms that are all set to the specs of a New York apartment. Most of these of their clients are all Medicaid clients, and there'll be big, huge apartment buildings. It's just all full of of those Medicaid clients. And so if you're a home care worker, you go to that building and you just go from apartment to apartment. So they have their things all set up with the same specs, and so they're trained, like, how do you get that wheelchair in the bathroom? And, how do you get the person into the shower? And it's amazing. They have 2,500 employees. And so, yeah, they've been around for 30-something years. So that was a great experiment, and they tried to expand that, or they did expand it to Philadelphia, Home Care Associates. They also tried to expand it to Boston, but that one for some reason didn't go. So those are the two oldest ones, and then after that, I believe, came... Okay, well, I guess it was Circle of Life. So Circle of Life in Bellingham, I can tell you real quickly, that was started by... actually a good friend of mine. She's an accountant. She had worked she had started a bookkeeping cooperative. She had worked at a tree planting cooperative, and she was on the board of the food co-op. So she knew something about co-ops. Well, one day her dad showed up on her front doorstep, and actually his wife delivered him there and said, You take care of him now. So she started hiring caregivers to take care of her dad, and he had to have like 24/7 care. Actually, 2 agencies fired him. He was difficult. So she was hiring private caregivers, and then she was like, I'm hiring these private caregivers, I'm doing a schedule, I'm doing a payroll. And she thought she didn't even know about these other places. This could be a co-op. And just had the idea for it, put out a public notice. Anybody interested in talking about home care co-op? That group, a little group of people formed. They met for like 2 years before they got this up and going. But she didn't know that there were any other home care co-ops or even other organizations to help. So 10 years ago, Circle of Life was founded. The other ones have kind of come along. But where I work, we've developed Circle of Life, Peninsula Home Care Co-op, and Capital Home Care Co-op. So if you look up here, you see that I don't know if you can tell, but Washington State, we have 3 home care co-ops. And there's only like 11 in the whole country. Wow. We also have 2 more in development right now. One in Port Angeles, getting ready to launch really soon. Then we have one that's in... they would like to cover Skagit Island, Snohomish County. So that's kind of what's going on nationwide and in our state. Any questions about any of that so far?
Where's the one in California? Is that
It's in LA.
Oh.
That one is it's all Filipinas. It's kind of born out of this Filipino Workforce Development Center. Yeah. The one over here, Cooperative Care in Whatcom, Wisconsin. I'm in communication with them a lot because they're in a really rural area where they have to drive long distances to get to their clients. And I'm finding more similarities with them in terms of dealing with the Skagit and Island co-op. Certainly they would have a lot to offer you out here in terms of, it would be similar. You know, they cover a wide area. The ones in black, Circle of Life, Peninsula, and Olympia are already in operations. Like I said, Circle of Life has been in operations 10 years. Peninsula Home Care is in Port Townsend. So they're like 3.5 years old now. And Olympia, it's actually called Capital Home Care, is about 1.5 years old. And then this is just to show you a little timeline. This was probably the fastest conversion I did. This is, it was 9 months from the first meeting to opening. Wow. So that was pretty quick. And also, even at that time, I don't think we had all the templates that we have now. It's like if the group is really cohesive and wants to go forward, we could actually go pretty fast now because we have all of the templates for the policies, for the all of the forms, etc. So this group was funded by a local lending group. It's called Local Investment Opportunity Network, LION. It was one of the first in the country, and they have funded so many businesses in Port Townsend. I think they told me like $5 million has passed through their group. Okay. So it's really something. So we met with that group. We did a presentation. I got on the ferry to go home. Before I even got across, the folks are already calling me. We got all the money we need, and they're trying to give us more. Awesome. And what was really, really great about this is that, you see, they opened for business in January 2016, July 2017. All of their loan paid back, $30,000. This co-op, they pay their workers $15 an hour. They average another 5 to 6 per hour in profit sharing. They started doing, this one is very, very successful. Part of the reason is because Jefferson County, 38.2% of the people in Jefferson County are over 65. So, and also where Port Townsend is, it's kind of isolated in a weird way. It's kind of like being on an island. And I think they've cornered the market. And also it's just a really supportive community. They had other co-ops, like 30-year-old co-ops there in other sectors. And so they were really, in this community, co-op is equated with quality. They really have that idea. So they were quite successful. So you see then in November 2017, that was their first profit sharing that they distributed. Any questions on any of that?
What did they charge their clients?
Right now, they just raised their rate to 27. I think it was 26. When we started it was 25.
Do you know kind of the average amount that folks are hiring the co-op for? Is it like 20 hours a week, like 5 hours a week?
Home care it's very unpredictable in that way. Uh-huh. So we never guarantee any kind of hours. We'd like to hire ahead, but we often aren't able to. Mm-hmm. So usually when we're hiring somebody, they're filling shifts right away, but no really guarantee on how many.
But in terms of clients, like how much are clients utilizing the cooperative?
I'm sorry. Yeah, great. You know, it's again wide range. You could have a client that's a couple hours a week, and then you get a 24/7 client, and okay. Yeah, so it really varies. None of the Washington home care co-ops, those 3 that are established, take Medicaid right now. When we became eligible at Circle of Life, we really had been waiting to get that contract. We thought once we got that contract, we would have the volume that we needed to really raise revenue. But when we got to that place, because you have to be in business for 3 years and show 2 years of financials before you can get this contract with the state. So when we met with them, the reimbursement rate was only $18, which that wasn't going to really work very well. And it was, they wanted us to cover 3 counties. And that we were a small little co-op. We didn't have the bandwidth to do that. So it was really a hard decision for the board, because they had been waiting and waiting till we get this Medicaid contract, and then we'll have a lot of clients, and also we'll be serving this sector of the community. And so it was very difficult for them to say no, but they had to think of, and again, going back to what's the purpose of this co-op, is to create good jobs for the workers, and also to keep the business alive, in perpetuity. So when they looked at that, they realized this is not going to be good for the co-op, and they passed on it. Now it's the reimbursement rate is 27 now from Medicaid, so they might revisit that. I don't know. In Port Townsend, it's a really wealthy community. There's more than enough private pay clients, so I don't think that they'll go that way. Capital Home Care in Olympia, they do want to do Medicaid when they become eligible. Yeah, Port Townsend, that 26 an hour, it could easily be 30 if they wanted to, but they don't want to. Yeah. They're serving their community. They're making a profit at that, so they're fine. So yeah, they're getting everyone's business. There's always this catch-22 of we want to serve our lower income community. Mm. However, we know that people in Port Townsend that co-op would tell you that population's already being served. They have Medicaid, so they're not. They just that's how they say. That's how they see it. And I understand that. I understand it. And depending on where you're at, like in Port Townsend, that works fine. There's plenty of people that can pay the private pay. But in other areas, that's not. Like next year, I'll be working in Yakima. That's probably not going to be the case there. They're probably really want to try to get that Medicaid contract as soon as possible. And when I looked at the market around here, I saw, let's see, I have written it down, $25.95 an hour, 26, 27, and there was one that was 30, 27, and one that's 30 in the agencies around here. But so it seemed pretty similar to Whatcom County, to tell you the truth.
And is the additional overhead that comes with Medicaid, is that because of billing and reimbursement?
Yeah, it's the billing. It's, one thing in this, I don't know about other places, but in the co-ops that I've worked with, one of the things that's been amazing to me is people of this generation, they pay their bills and they pay them on time. Cash flow should be your biggest problem in this sector, and it's not. There's really not. That's really kind of been funny to me.
You're talking about the caregivers, or you're talking about
the clients?
Cared for?
Our clients, they pay their bills on time, and so you don't have that cash flow issue. Where with DSHS, or even within our long-term insurance clients, we're waiting for that money to come back.
Yeah.
And that's really been at Circle of Life. We just had a client pass away 3 months ago, and she still owes us $14,000, and we're still waiting for her estate. That's a lot of money for a little co-op. 24/7 care.
Oh,
So that was only a month and a half. Yeah. That's an example of a client. This was an interesting one. A client that every other agency in the county had fired her. Really, really difficult person. The caregivers had to they had to put a gown on and a mask, gloves, and then they had one room in the house that was called the clean room, where they would, when they're not working, they'd be in that room. And like I said, it's a really, really difficult client, but we try to work in teams, and so we called this let's say her name was Kathy, the Kathy team. And so we got that team together, what kind of training do you need, get them everything that they need, and then also made them independent of the schedule. Said, you guys, you schedule yourselves. You make sure that this is staffed, and If you want to change days off, you change it off together. This group of people, there's 5 caregivers, 6. And so when they felt it was necessary, one of them would call a meeting. They'd all meet at some like coffee shop or something. 45 minutes, talk about the client, figure out what we need to do next. We empower them to, yes, you'll be paid for those meetings. You call your own meetings. You do this yourself. And they stepped up, and that client got to stay at home. She got to pass away at home. And it was so meaningful to those caregivers. But because they were a team, like they really, you had a really bad shift with Kathy, you have a team of people you can call on and get support from. And, like they know her worst time of the day. And the caregiver that was there at the worst time of the day, the other caregivers would bring her a treat. Oh. Yeah. And so they're quite proud of that. Like we took care of that client when no one else would. She would have had to go into the hospice house, and she did not want to. So.
That's the end of part 1. You can find part 2 on this same YouTube channel. If you want more info, you can contact Deborah Craig at Deborah, DEBORAH, at nwcdc.coop. That's Deborah, DEBORAH, at nwcdc.coop, or call Room 1 at 509-997-2050. You've been listening to Voices of the Methow, an off-the-wall production. Until next time, thanks for listening.